Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Paradise, and I work with the Arthritis Foundation as a Live Yes Connect group facilitator in the Chicago area. I have previously worked as a registered nurse for over 25 years, and about 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with seronegative rheumatoid arthritis. I will admit I enjoy food, and one of my biggest hobbies is loving to bake. Because of that, I admit to having a sweet tooth. And I have since learned with my arthritis that when I eat lots of sugar, my body does not feel good. So I am excited this evening to introduce this webinar, Taming Inflammation with Culinary Medicine. We are going to be privileged to listen to Dr. Roizen and Chef Perko this evening, and they will teach us about the best eating habits for inflammation and how to keep it under control. So let's get started. Just a few housekeeping announcements. All the attendees have been muted so that we can hear the presentation well. There is a question and answer function at the bottom of your screen. You can type questions into the chat box. Following the presentation, we will have a question and answer period. Also want to just make you aware of the fact that there have already been many questions submitted this evening when you registered. So we will be addressing as many as we can. If you do not find a direct answer to your question or hear it answered tonight, please go to our resources, which include arthritis.org/helpline. The Arthritis Foundation has people that are there just to answer your questions. Also, following this, you will receive an email that will go over this event and ask for your feedback. So please make sure you take time to fill some of these out. It really does help us in planning programming and to get you some of the best information to what you need to hear. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. I'm excited to introduce our experts tonight. You may have seen them on PBS specials, as I have. First, Dr. Michael Roizen. Dr. Roizen is an acclaimed pioneer in the field of holistic medicine and diet therapy. He has authored several New York Times bestsellers and is considered one of the foremost voices on healthy living. He created the Real Age concept and is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Real Age. Dr. Roizen is also the past chairman of an FDA advisory committee and former editor for 6 medical journals. He has published more than 155 peer-reviewed scientific papers, 100 textbook chapters, 30 editorials, and 4 medical books, including a medical bestseller. He has also received 12 US patents and several foreign patents. Chef Jim Perko Sr. Chef Jim Perko has been part of the Cleveland Clinic for over 36 years. During his time at the Cleveland Clinic, he has collaborated with numerous physicians to develop the first evidence-based, technique-driven culinary medicine initiatives for the Cleveland Clinic. He has developed culinary curricula and recipes for 6 patient programs in the culinary medicine for chronic disease, including the culinary medicine for chronic disease. He is the creator and provider of the first Cleveland Clinic culinary medicine patient consult program to help patients execute prescribed nutritional plans and find true enjoyment in their new and tailored culinary plans. We'd like to thank both of them for giving up their time this evening and spending it with us. We'll go ahead and start discussing our subject. First, we're going to turn it over to Chef Perko.
Debunking junk science. So when we say get healthy by choice, it's a choice because there's a tsunami of opposition against us. It's so easy to get manufactured foods at the dollar store. Things are really cheap, they're affordable. And the people that manufacture those foods, they describe it as good as delicious, but the real science shows that these foods can actually be very harmful for us. Next, please. Next slide. Thank you. And so here's the example of that. It's really hard to navigate that science because look, what is healthy? It's hard for us to figure it out. It's hard for professionals and providers because the science is always changing, but it's really hard for the layperson. Here's an example. There's so many different books and messages about what to eat and what not to eat. And the word of the mouse is that's a clear example because we got one physician that says not to eat lectins, which are in legumes, which all the blue zones and the longest living populations have legumes in their diet. And that was written in the Plant Paradox. And then people go on to a site called nutritionfacts.org, founded by Michael Greger, who says this guy's all wrong. So there's polarizing opinions. It's hard to navigate that science, but culinary medicine, what it does, it takes that science and makes it taste good. And we'll show you more about how we do that. Next slide, please. And this is the bottom line, that anytime we eat anything, we're either feeding or fighting disease, right? We promote inflammation or fight inflammation, but that could depend what our diagnoses are, right? You know, what feeds and what fights disease. So if someone has celiac disease, they can have gluten, but someone else probably could have gluten. So that could be different for everybody as well. And so we're going to go through some of that in this video.
The science is in the What to Eat When book, and all the recipes you'll see today and in the e-recipe book come from the What to Eat When cookbook. If you will, the key is only eat foods you love that will love you back. That is, food is a relationship. It's like a marriage. You wouldn't marry someone who is trying to kill you every day. You shouldn't eat food that's trying to kill you every day. You may like steak or you may love French fries, but both steak and French fries create inflammation and are trying to kill you. Bad choices. But on the other hand, there are many foods, and we'll go through those, such as avocados or salmon or many, many choices such as olives that make your life better, that you can love and that will love you back. So I'm first going to go through what we call the 5 snake oil foods. These are foods, as Lisa started to say about, since 3 of them are relating to sugar, that have definitely been shown to increase inflammation in large percentages of our populations. So foods that increase your blood sugar quickly change a lot of things, and we'll go through that. And those are simple sugars, and there's some exceptions that we'll come to, syrups, and stripped carbs. So what are the problems with too high a blood sugar level? Well, you accumulate fat in your middle. That's omental, or fat that hangs off your stomach is called the omentum or visceral fat. That causes inflammation. So fat used to be thought of as just a storage vehicle, but it isn't. It's metabolically active, and that white or yellow omental or visceral fat causes inflammation in you. The second problem is blood glucose attaches to proteins like hemoglobin A1C. All hemoglobin A1C is a hemoglobin molecule with a glucose attached at the A1C position. What does that do? It causes dysfunction in the hemoglobin. It doesn't allow it to release oxygen normally. Another example is the grout protein in the arteries that makes that protein less functional. We call this protein glycosylation. So here's a picture of a heart attack, and you see this is a tear in the wall. I'm going to stop it there. What caused that tear in the wall? Well, what caused that tear in the wall was a weakened grout protein because someone had too much sugar. Then normal blood pressure or increased blood pressure came along, created that tear. You plaster over that tear, repair it, as you would a tear in a bathroom tiles with a grout substance. In this case, you repair it with LDL cholesterol, actually apolipoprotein B containing cholesterol, LDL cholesterol. And over time, that gets inflammation behind it. That's where the plaque builds up. And then stressful event occurs, bango, ruptures, and the platelets accumulate here, track a lattice network of clotting factors. They stop the red things or red cells from traveling, and that's a heart attack or a stroke or a impotence or a wrinkle in your skin. Is there any difference between a wrinkle in the skin and a heart attack? No, it's just the blood vessel it caused in. Same thing started it. Too much sugar, too high a blood sugar level. So the second thing, it attaches to those proteins like that grout protein or hemoglobin A1C. It makes the proteins less functional. The third thing is that the increases kidney dysfunction due to an increased uric acid level. A uric acid level over 5.5 is associated with, if you will, poor handling of sugar, specifically fructose. And 4, it chronically decreases energy production capability due to the reactive oxygen effects of mitochondria. So normally we have thousands of mitochondria per cell. As glucose or fat travels down the energy transfer chain, it gets transformed into ATP or phosphocreatine, phospho-TP. What happens if and in that production is that you generate reactive oxygen species. Those are normally buffered by your in-cell antioxidants. So the only antioxidants that really matter are glutathione catalase and, if you will, what did I miss? Glutathione catalase and SOD. And those 3 buffer the reactive oxygen species. Well, if you present too much food and create too many ROS, you overwhelm your buffering capacity. You create errors here, which means we get less energy from the same amount of glucose or fat. And that's why, as we get older, this is a progressive loss of energy. What is the worst day for this? Well, it's either Thanksgiving or Super Bowl Sunday when we overeat and overeat in a short period of time, causing the reactive species. So the key is to eat smaller meals at all times. This also is shown in what we call a benefits of legumes study. This is a very small study of just 7 humans eat either lentils, which have the same amount of carbohydrate as whole grain bread, but the difference is that the fiber in the legume holds on to that sugar, so you don't have as great a reduction in simple sugars. So although it has the same amount of carbs, the breakfast lentils have a lower peak glucose level and thus would be associated with a lower, if you will, attachment to proteins, lower glycosylation effect, and a continued set of lower problems. Now, there are some other choices with sugar for those people who like sweets, and Jim will go through one of those tonight at least. But the raisin reduction, one of the things that is benefit, and you don't have to use erythritol or xylitol or other rare sugars, but the reason is that allulose is a sugar that hasn't been paid much attention to because it was rare and we lack the ability to synthesize it. But recently, about 5 years ago, people in Japan, a physician in Japan, discovered a way to convert D-fructose, abundant, into allulose. That's led to a series of studies, and what has been shown is that allulose has about half the sweetness of sugar, regular table sugar, but blocks the absorption of sugar as well as both fructose and glucose and other simple sugars, may be an answer to the problem. Where do we find allulose normally? Well, it turns out that allulose, and obviously you will get a copy slide, so I'm going through them very quickly, but allulose decreases the risk of diabetes. It looks like it has some strong benefits. It does have laxative effects if given in too high a dose, but you can substitute it in a 2-to-1 ratio for regular sugar. For example, Lisa says she likes to bake. It's one of the ways you can substitute it and monitor your sugar level with Dexcom 6 or Freestyle Libre, or pretty soon the Apple Watch we learned of today. The Apple Watch will have a sugar monitoring capability soon, and when that happens, you'll be able to monitor your peak blood sugar level and see if allulose works for you. Now, the second group of snake oil foods are ones that cause inflammation by changing your gut microbiome. This is really quite interesting data. It came out of the Cleveland Clinic in about 2007 from Stan Hazen's lab, but was the fact that when you eat carnitine and saturated fat together, or lecithin and saturated fat, or choline and saturated fat, it changes your gut microbiome within 3 days to produce trimethylamine, which your body converts to trimethylamine oxide. So you taking cheese, egg yolks, or red meat, and we now think it is mainly red meat and processed red meat are the harmful components, but eating those produces trimethylamine. That gives you, if you then block it from producing trimethylamine oxide, you end up smelling like a rotten fish. That's the trimethylamine is the rotten fish smell. But it is a greater cause of atherosclerosis than is LDL cholesterol. That is, if you look at the plasma TMAO level, which you can measure, it is a greater cause of inflammation in all systems, especially your arteries, and yes, your joints too, than is cholesterol itself, and a greater relative risk of all-cause mortality. And that goes for MI or stroke as well. And the key is you can measure trimethylamine oxide and see if your diet has changed, or if your patient's diet has changed their bacteria inside them. So just measure TMAO. You want to do it 24 hours after your last fish meal. As I said, fish, when their meat gets metabolized, it gets into TMAO. They don't produce it. They don't cause the bacteria to produce it. So it is much less inflammatory. It goes away in a day, as opposed to eating one portion of red meat, 6 ounces or more of red meat a week, changes your bacteria for 2 weeks. And they keep producing trimethylamine and keep inflammation in you. An anti-inflammatory substance is dexahexanoic acid, DHA, one of the omega-3s that's an important component of all cell membranes. You really want to be called a fathead because 97% of the brain fat, the brain is 60% fat, and 50% of that is omega-3, and 97% of that 50% is DHA. Same in the retina or your eye. So it facilitates synaptic transmission and it supports myelination as well as reduces inflammation. Now, how important is diet to dementia and the inflammation that is caused by dementia? Well, it includes the, if you will, healthy diets, what we call a mind diet, and who rigorously ate it, did nothing else, no physical activity, no anything else, just followed the diet, had a 60% reduction in development of dementia over a 6-year period by that alone. One more component of health is nuts. There are many studies, especially strong with walnuts. But all nuts, whether it is, and even in the Iowa Health Study, it was peanuts were considered nuts. But whether it is walnuts or other nuts, it appears that there is a strong benefit. In randomized controlled trials looking at cardiac death, a half an ounce of walnuts a day halved heart attack risk over a 8-month period. And if you look at this is the nuts and walnuts. It's about a 1.25 to 1.5 year benefit for longevity by eating an ounce of nuts, if you will, 5 or more times a week. So 12 walnut halves decreased the cardiac events by 50% in Chile in the Campos and all study that I showed you. In the Spanish outcome study published in the New England Journal, 1.5 ounces of nuts, and walnuts were 50% of those. 9 walnut halves a day added to the Mediterranean diet versus the standard Spanish diet decreased cardiac events, decreased breast cancer as well by 30%. In the study, now I eat a lot of salmon, as Jim will tell you, and Gabby will tell you, but when I had my omega-3 index measured, even though I eat salmon almost every day of the week, I was in the middle range. So I had to take a supplement to get to the highest range, which decreases your risk. And the amount of apparently you want as a supplement in the brain studies is 900 milligrams of DHA. In the cardiac studies, and inflammation levels are decreased when you get to 1100 milligrams, that is half DHA and half EPA, 2 of the omega-3s. Now, there's also a benefit of olive oil. It lowers cardiovascular disease risk, and in this study looking at total mortality, using olive oil instead of margarine, butter, or other saturated fats protects you from dying from cardiovascular and respiratory disease, dementia, and other conditions. A diet that includes approximately half a tablespoon, that's not much, half a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil daily cuts the risk for cardiovascular death and all-cause death by 19% and decreased inflammation levels substantially. So this is the total mortality, substituting olive oil for margarine, for butter, for mayonnaise, etc. And whether you looked at neurodegenerative diseases or cancer or cardiovascular or respiratory disease, they all showed tremendous benefits from just half a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil a day. So I have put in a number of the references, and some of these show both healthier brain and eye function, all due to decreased respiratory effect, and the references are included. I want to now go over, and that's the solid data we have. I now want to go and speculate about what is coming. We've expanded life expectancy by about 2.5 years. The green is life expectancy of men, the blue of women. Women always live about 2.5 years to 3.5 years longer than men. since 1890 by about 2.5 years every decade. Initially, this was due to public health and childhood diseases, more recently due to the management of chronic disease in the elderly. But there are 14 areas of research, and I love doing this, so I'm going to do it again. There are 14 areas of research into the mechanism of aging, which show an exponential gain is possible. These have all affected, and you've read articles probably about them, the rate of aging in and rebooted to younger ages at least 2 animal species from all 14 of these areas. Thus, we expect that if this occurs, if there are 14 shots on goal, we may get a tremendous change in our life expectancy in the next 10 years. One of those areas, it relates to, and these are the 14 areas, but one of them relates to the elimination of obesity. That is, white fat causes inflammation. We spoke about omental or visceral fat. That's what white fat is. It causes inflammation. We're born with both brown and white fat. Brown fat actually uses calories, and this is a way, if you can create brown fat from white fat, you could eliminate obesity and all of the things that it causes, such as osteoarthritis, such as type 2 diabetes, such as much heart disease. And people say, come on, that's not possible. We can't eliminate obesity. Well, 20 years ago, people didn't think we'd be able to eliminate or even treat, if you will, cancers with vaccines. We're now able to do that. They probably 40 years ago, we didn't even think you could have disease modifying agents for osteoarthritis. But it is possible, and obesity has increased from 11 to 43% now in men and 17 to 54% in women over the age of 18. Our genes haven't changed. That causes a lot of inflammatory diseases. And while we have some GLP-1 medicines, they may have long-term adverse effects and have to be taken continuously. But, and let me go and say, thermoregulation and hyperpalatable, chronically dense foods have increased our white and yellow fat, but we can transform that white or yellow fat back to mother fat and then transform it into brown or beige fat at least 3 ways. One is by that transformation. In animal models, they have taken white fat, regressed it to mother fat, and given an agent that turns it into brown or beige fat. How doable is this? It's with 2 available and, in fact, if you will, generic drugs that are already on the market, the people who have done this, and it's been done in 2 centers. The second is cold therapy. One of the benefits of sitting out in the cold and that thermoregulation heating systems disadvantages with is if you're in the cold for 11 minutes, that is totally naked in a cold environment or in 62-degree temperature without any clothes on for 11 minutes, or swimming in a cold therapy pool for 11 minutes a week, you actually induce brown fat from white fat. And there are other things that do this as well. So one of the solutions for obesity may be the transformation of white fat into brown fat that is coming, and you get rid of a lot of inflammation. So I wanted to mention that that is what is coming. That's part of our book, is part of what this is, if you will, this what we call the reboot or the great age reboot. So where have we been? We said, 1, food is a relationship. You should only eat food you love and that loves you back. The hazards of single food are the food that increases blood sugar quickly, added sugar, syrups, and strip carbs, they cause inflammation. And foods also can cause inflammation by changing your gut microbiome. Foods that decrease inflammation, that have been shown to do so reliably, are salmon, ocean trout, omega-3s, such as the DHA and EPA, omega-9s, such as in extra virgin olive oil, and any nut. We're going to discuss nightshades, gluten, dairy, fats, herbs, and spices. We didn't do that here. We'll discuss those in the Q&A period, as those are really quite an individual item. I'm going to stop my sharing now, and Jim Perko, Chef Perko, will take over.
There we go. So this is what everybody's always asking, right? What are we going to have for lunch today? What are we going to have for dinner today? Well, this is where culinary medicine can help. So this is huge, but what is culinary medicine? So this is the January issue of Today's Dietitian, which is the main publication of the American Academy of Dietetics. And it's the first time I ever saw culinary medicine on the cover of the Dietitian's main magazine, right? So now sometimes it seems like it's a buzzword. Culinary medicine is relatively new. It's, the term of it's a relatively new field, but now it's really going mainstream. What is culinary medicine? Well, at Cleveland Clinic, culinary medicine combines the evidence-based science of food. Now, you saw that earlier slide where one doc will say this and another doc will say that, and the science can be across the board, right? It's hard to navigate. So we try to take the strongest evidence-based science and combine it with the joy and art of cooking. So the strongest science of food, nutrition, and medicine, and we combine that with the joy and art of cooking. And also, while we're on this slide, when you make a meal, you're just not feeding your belly. You're not just, there's a lot of components to mealtime. You've got functional exercise when you wash the pots and pans and cutting and chopping, especially if anybody had a garden and you're growing. I do yoga when I pull weeds in my garden. You get lots of exercise in the meal process. You get some physicians and docs will talk about essential oils for aromatherapy, right? Well, in the kitchen, you get a lot of aromatherapy with ginger and garlic. I got 4 grandsons. You know what they're going to remember about Papa? His kitchen smells like garlic. Because when you do when you create food aromas, that creates food memories that are formed in childhood and carried for life. We all have those. And there's also a lot of hospitality. Dr. Roizen mentioned earlier about Thanksgiving. That's the day we all break bread together with one another. So there's a lot of hospitality in the mealtime. I mean, history was written with food on the table, right? So there's so much hospitality in food. Next, please. This is what I really want you to take note. This is the take home of what culinary medicine really, really is. It takes the science and it makes it taste good. So we take that strongest nutritional science and it makes it taste good so you can enjoy it no matter what diet you're going to follow. Here's an example. We're currently working with the Tulsa Cancer Center, right? And we created a Tulsa Cancer Culinary Medicine Toolkit. So if there's a cancer patient that's got a head and neck cancer that has difficulty chewing, needs to be on a texture modified diet, or even more extreme, a puree diet, then we want that puree to taste good and that patient gets quality of life. And that's what culinary medicine does. So when Lisa said she wants to try to, moderate the consumption of sugar or avoid it, how can we make things taste good without adding sugar or without adding sodium or without adding fat or decreasing those? That's what culinary medicine does. How do you begin and how do you start? So here's the first thing we tell our patients. Don't think about what you can have, shouldn't have, or advise not to have. Instead, you think about all the things you can have. Here's an example. If you were diagnosed as having celiac disease and you can't have gluten, you can't have wheat, then you think about all the things that are gluten-free and that becomes your can-have world. And that applies to any diagnosis or any dietary restriction. All the things that you are advised not to have or that you need to avoid, you know, why worry about it? Just drive you nuts. So don't think about it. Instead, you think about all the things you can have. So in the case of that celiac patient, they're going to think about millet, they're going to think about quinoa and all the other gluten-free grains. This is the bottom line on everything. Dr. Mike said it in the very beginning that you wouldn't marry someone that wants to kill you. So the bottom line is you want to love the foods that love you back. And that could be different for everybody because gluten's not going to love back the celiac patient, right? But so what we want to do is, that's why you can see my background. We're in the kitchen. This is where the rubber meets the road. So whatever you're being prescribed or advised to do, if you can find enjoyment in it, that means you are loving the foods that love you back. And we try to create and increase everybody's culinary literacy so they can execute what is being prescribed to them so they don't compromise the taste of their meals or their health. This one is hugely important. You can't love what you don't know. So let's go back to the celiac patient. How do you know you're not going to like millet if you never tried it? Okay, so you can't love what you don't know. You want to give things a try. If you want to try to do something, we're going to do a raisin reduction instead of add. It's a way that which also raisins contain allulose. So we're going to show you how to make it. And you could use it in baking and savory dishes. It doesn't matter. It applies to almost anything. But you know you're not going to like it if you don't try it. Or how do you know you won't like a mac and cheeseless? That we make a great mac and cheese that has no cheese, right? It's absolutely delicious. So these are the things, this important side, you got to give things a try that you're not familiar with. And this is huge. Knife skills are so important because no matter what diet you are being prescribed to follow, you still got to know how to hold a knife in your hand, right? And we teach that. There's a link to a video there that explains it in detail. You could go to that link and watch it. And we also have handouts on that, and you'll be able to see that. And the reason that's important is because the more efficient you are in cooking and culinary skills, the less laborious that process becomes, because a lot of people says they don't have time to cook. So the better you are at it, then the easier that becomes. And who knows, it brings out the chef again, you might even like it. Here's another link. When COVID hit on May 13, 2020, Dr. Roizen and I started our first episode of In the Kitchen with Chef Jim and Dr. Mike. There are now 110 episodes. All you got to do is Google In the Kitchen with Chef Jim, Dr. Mike. Dr. Mike gives the science. I illustrate it with a recipe. He'll talk about the hazards of eating an egg yolk and the choline that's in that. And then I show you how to make something without egg yolk. So it's really a great thing. That's the link. I encourage you to check it out. 110 episodes. Here's an example about don't think about what you can have. We're going to demonstrate this today. The raisin reduction first, how to make. So raisins got protein, they got fiber, they got antioxidants, but they also have allulose in there naturally occurring, right? Which is something I learned from Dr. Roizen about the allulose in the raisin. Didn't even know when we started doing that recipe. But think about it this way. If you were to make a dressing with no oil that has prunes in it, when people get constipated, they gnash on prunes, right? So, but prunes are sweet and they're also loaded with calcium. But you got the fiber attached to the naturally occurring sugar. And that's the best way to get your sweetness with the fiber attached. And prunes got it, and so do raisins. Now, the other one we're going to teach you or show you today is cashew-nase. So if you have mayonnaise not only does it have oil in it, it has egg yolks in it. And you heard Dr. Roizen talk about egg yolks. So, and then you could get an alternative version like Vegenaise. The problem with Vegenaise, two problems. It's so good you can eat it with a spoon, and the second one, the main ingredient's all oil. It's 80 calories a tablespoon, and the main ingredient's oil. Cashew-nase has no oil other than the cashew. We're gonna move on because I'm gonna show you how to make it. And here's a close-up of the raisin reductions because you might not see when I make it, but it's simply this. Equal parts, cup of raisins, a cup of water, or 2 cups of raisins, 2 cups of water. You'll reduce it down, puree it. I'm going to show you over here and you'll get to see it, and I'll show you when it's made up close. But and you can make, if you did 2 cups and 2 cups of water and you reduce it down, you blend it, you can keep that in your freezer. Then anytime you need to sweeten something, you're doing it with a raisin. And you get all the benefits of that. Now, here's a great way to add moisture. If you take any grain, this one is rice, but it could be rice, it could be farro, it could be quinoa, it could be millet, it could be any grain you want it to be. Look, if you got a cup of grains, moisten it with 4 or 5 or 6 cups of plants. In this case, look, we got greens. This is chard, and we do a chiffonade or a julienne or cut it in strips because it wilts really quickly. Then we take it out of the pan, which, by the way, greens of all the plants, greens they're loaded with nutrients. They're the bonanza of all the plants of nutrients because they're just loaded with so many nutrients. So they're great things to include in your diet. Kale and collards and chard and spinach and arugula, which is one of the highest greens in plant-based nitrates. So the greens go out, then you can put in onions, and you can put in mushrooms. Mushrooms not a plant. Mushrooms isn't an animal, it's a fungus. They got cardiovascular benefits, but they also have umami, that savory flavor. Then we could add in other vegetables, peppers, zucchini, whatever you want. You put the greens back, you put some broth in. You could spike the broth with chilies if you want to, give it some heat. And then you add your grain to it and toss it. Now you moisten the grain with the plants. It's the veggie rice. You don't need a recipe for veggie rice. You could put the kitchen sink in it, leftover chopped up broccoli or asparagus from yesterday's dinner. And you could do the same thing with potatoes. So the old way of sour cream and butter and margarine on a potato, heck with that. Look, we take potatoes, and by the way, you see in that top slide, there's purple Peruvian potatoes. When you have a purple potato, you get the same anthocyanins as you get in a blueberry, just because of the color purple. That's why you hear dietitians tell you to eat the colors on your plate. You want to eat the rainbow. That's why, because there's different phytonutrients in all those different colors. So mix up those colors and eat the rainbow. And we got a red onion there for that as well. So, and then here's another thing. So here's why knife skills are important. If you look at the top one there, the third one over where the knife is, everything's cut nice and small, same size pieces. Because when you got stuff in small, and you go to fork into these potatoes and that, you get a little bit of that stuff in every bite. And that's where knife skills are really important. So we got carrots, you could put in sweet potatoes, you could put in butternut squash, then we got greens, and then you can have mushrooms or beans, whatever. But look, you can see we are now moistening the potatoes with plants. That's the best way to do it. You get all the colors and all those nutrients and the fiber with it. Here's another one. That's millet down there that you could see, okay? And so this is a ragu that we're doing, a harissa vegetable ragu, but look, you could get crushed tomatoes. You got peppers, asparagus, green beans, lima beans that were frozen, right? You put all that stuff in there, it is jumping with flavor. Harissa is really great, and it's a great meal, okay? It's a veggie ragu, and you put it over millet. Okay, here's another example. So this one are mushrooms, right? We take them, we go to stuff them, we got vegetables, we got grain, and that red you see on, those are tomatoes. I stuck those in there, you know why? Because people get all these tomatoes in the summer, and they can them and whatnot. But you know what I love to do? I love to roast them. I take harissa spice, garlic, little olive oil, I put them in the oven, I roast them till I get like a oven dry, not like a sun dry, but this is oven dry. It brings out the umami. Tomatoes are loaded with umami. That's why kids like ketchup, because there's umami in tomatoes. You just don't know it when it's raw, but when you cook it and you caramelize the sugars, that's what happened. The next one over, that's hummus. You could take hummus and put those oven roasted or dried tomatoes on your hummus. Absolutely delicious. Then we chop those up, we put them in with the mushroom. But here's what to look at. See what's coming off of that spoon? We took the juices that were in the pan on the bottom left, and we reduced them down, down, down. After reducing it, it intensifies with flavor, fortifies that flavor, and then we put that with our mushrooms that came out of the oven, and all that liquid was just the moisture that came out of the mushrooms and the vegetables. Reduced it down, you see how thick it is. Then we garnish it with fresh watercress, loaded with nutrients, gives you the yin and the yang in the full meal. Delicious. Next, please.
Hey, Chef, just want
Yes.
to give you a note on time. I don't know if it's on my notes. We'll be about 20 minutes
Oh.
for your demo.
Okay. Got it. Thanks, Robin. This is farro, okay? And you see the vegetables with the grain, okay? It moistens with the grain. The next one's quinoa. And this is a quinoa ragu. Same thing, one pot meal. You got beans, you got broccoli, you got onions, you got spinach, you got arugula, you got tomato sauce you could buy. If you look at the top there, it's the take home combines convenience with scratch. You buy the tomato sauce, you could buy black beans in a can. You could buy arugula and spinach already in a clamshell, a cello bag. You just got to cook the quinoa and cook the onions and fresh garlic. The rest is convenience. You got a great meal. You can morph it the next day by adding pasta, like a chili mac, whatever. It's absolutely delicious. I'm trying to give you some ideas, and hopefully I want to inspire and motivate everybody to try these things. They're absolutely delicious. Next, please. And this is a vegetable ragu, same idea. Peas are frozen. You can even buy broccoli frozen to put this. Tomato crushed in a can, crushed tomatoes. You add your broth, you simmer it. And then next, please, I'll show you how to make dumplings to go with that. Here's how you make a vegan dumpling. This is butternut squash, or it could be lentils or a legume. It's got to be cooked and put it in a processor with baking powder, baking soda, a gluten-free flour or a regular flour, but they can easily be gluten-free. You make the batter, you put it into your broth, you poach it. Those are great butternut squash dumplings that go with that vegetable ragu. But it's so easy to do. All these recipes are in that book. Next, please. And you can make baba ganoush, but if you don't have time, you can easily buy it at a Middle Eastern store. But now the take home on this one is when you come home from work and you're trying to eat something in Nashan, you could dip a vegetable in a vegetable. That's what baba ganoush is. Or you can take it to work with you some vegetables to dip for lunch, but it's a healthy thing to have to Nashan. And then this one's in the book. It's a perennial favorite. It's garden chive bean dip. It's great to stock your pantry with good stuff, because you could put in the freezer the lima beans and the peas, the artichokes are in a can. You can have lemon juice in a bottle. The only fat is tahini. You got garlic, you got cumin, and the freshest scallion and chives. It makes a great dip. Recipes in the book. It's outstanding. And I think Robin might even have it on the ebook that she's going to give you. And you're dipping a veggie in a veggie. Here's a take home on this. We make a broccoli bean salad, but look what we're doing here. Okay. So a textbook ratio for salad dressing, a vinaigrette salad dressing, is 3 parts oil to 1 part acid. We tell people not to do anything more than 1 to 1. We're going to show you how to make it with none. But look at, if you take, instead of thickening it with extra oil, we take beans, mash them and whisk it in, and that thickens it. And we want our broccoli really dry. We don't shock it in cold water. See how we got it on the top there in towel. So as soon as you blanch it, take it out. Don't run it under cold water to shock it. Put it in your fridge or blot it dry so it absorbs all the goodness in that bowl. A mac and cheeselets. There we go. So, okay, you don't need cheese. Here's how you make it. 28 ounces sweet potatoes, 4 cups unsweetened almond milk. You can use a cup of cashew soaked overnight, or tofu instead, one or the other. You put that in a blender with salt, pepper, Dijon mustard, nutmeg, cayenne salt. Comes out just like a cheese sauce. And you put it over whole grain pasta. It's outstanding. No cheese. It's also in the book. Pesto, this one is vegan, no cheese. And instead of putting over pasta, we put it over green beans. And here's how we're gonna make this, so I'm gonna bypass it. But while it's there, 3 figs, 3 prunes, 3/4 cup of water, blueberries. You put it in a pot, you reduce it down, and then you put that in a processor or blender with blueberries, balsamic vinegar, and you got this great dressing with some salt, pepper, garlic, and mustard. And this one's a tahini dressing. So we got lemon juice, we got low sodium tamari, balsamic vinegar, tahini, garlic. It's absolutely delicious. That's in the book too. Okay, that's Dr. Roizen's famous salmon patty on a kale salad. That's a great way to have a meal. And that just shows the salmon patty Doc gets from Costco. And the kale salad's in the book, and so is that recipe. But it's, instead of having a burger, it's a great way to have a healthy meal on a fly, very easy. And this is a salad made with cucumbers and tomatoes, and we add Doc's walnuts to it. It's delicious. It's a cucumber tomato salad with avocado, gives you healthy fats. That's in there as well. And if you're going to have an egg, just to have, if you have sunny or scrambled eggs, you just have an egg to have an egg. And we don't use the yolk. So if you make a frittata, like you could see here, Then the egg whites were nothing more than the glue to hold a bunch of plants together, and you got ginger, turmeric, and you put all that in there, and now that egg is working for you. Okay, this is cauliflower gold. This is a great one too. I think we gave this to Robin as well, and it's an outstanding recipe, and it's also in those videos. So any recipe you may not see here, go to In the Kitchen with Chef Jim, Dr. Mike. You get them for free on there, and you watch us make them. This one's for sure is, and this is a new one we just did a few weeks ago on In the Kitchen with Chef Jim, Dr. Mike. Harissa cauliflower. Harissa, we show you how to make the harissa spice just right there. I'm going to make it now. You put the caraway in the grinder with the other spices. I'm going to do that with the fish, which I better get going now and do. Put it over cauliflower. It's outstanding. Great with hummus. Tofu. We make so good tofu, just like General Tso, TSO, right? We make the sauce, a healthy way of making it. And that's on our video as well in the kitchen. And we did it with tofu and broccoli. And then zucchini, tomato, walnuts. When everybody's got a lot of tomatoes in the garden, this is a great side dish. And we just did an episode a few weeks ago in the kitchen, how to turn this into a main entree by adding pasta and mushrooms and spinach. Absolutely delicious. And that's an oblique cut. We showed on the video how to do an oblique cut, classic stir fry cut. Next, please. And I think I got to wrap it up and start cooking. Okay. You don't want to burn or char nothing because there's carcinogens associated with it. So please don't do that when you grill. And this is how you do it instead. There's a video how we do that. We did it in my yard. Go to In the Kitchen with Chef Jim, Dr. Mike. But here's the key. Everything's small, lean, and thin. That's in that grill no more than 2 minutes. I'm going to show you how to do the salmon now. And you can easily grill it, but we're going to do it in the oven. It's a corn muffin with no butter or no dairy. It's vegan. It's sweetened with an apple, and it's absolutely fabulous. And this is a chocolate chunk cookie that is outstanding. It's in the book. It's in the videos. I encourage you to do it. It's made with walnuts. It's made with pecans, 70% cocoa, dark bitter sweet chocolate. Check out the video. It's outstanding. It's vegan. No eggs, no dairy. Chocolate barks. Doc talks about eating nuts, 70% cocoa. Just mix it with nuts. You got a bark. We did a video on that as well. And this, instead of having ice cream, which is the trifecta of added sugar, sodium, and fat, you got a banana, almond butter, vanilla, flaxseed, 3/4 cup of unsweetened almond milk. Banana is frozen, right? It's ripe. Put that in a blender. It's better than a milkshake. We also got a video on that. Okay, and this is our services. Robin has it up. I'm not going to go into it now because I'm out of time. But if anybody wants more, there's the number. You could call that number. You could see that link, go to the link, and you can get any of our providers for those services. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see me. So here's what we got. We got raisins and a cup of water. So what we did, we just take the raisins, we put them in, okay, and then it's so simple. It just goes into the blender like so. Put the blender on, and we blend it.
Jim, what'd you put in with the raisins?
Raisins and water. But I'm going to bring this close to you. When it's done, here's what it looks like, okay? And so this is what we got, so everybody could see it. That's what it looks like when it's done. A cup of raisins, cup of water, reduces down to a couple tablespoons, blend it, and that's raisin reduction. Look, it looks like baby food. And this has allulose the natural way, the way God made, right? Okay, now we take this raisin reduction to make the cashew-nase, okay? Here's how we do cashew-nase. We got our cashews, goes into the blender. We got some water. Okay, you guys got the recipe for this. We gave them to Robin. Lemon juice. We got 3 acids: apple cider vinegar. We got distilled vinegar, and we got lemon juice. Then we put in dry mustard that's dry, like Coleman's. Okay, we got in fresh garlic. Okay. And then we got a little bit of our raisin reduction that goes in. And we just take this, same deal, this goes in, and we blend it like so. And then we're going to tamp it down, and we're going to blend it. And when it's all blended, here's what it looks like. because this blender's loud and I knew we'd be out of time, so I got before and after on everything for you. But look at, that's exactly what it looks like when it comes out of the blender. When you refrigerate this, it's almost like cream cheese. My wife and I, we put it on the bread that's in that book, the whole grain rye pumpkin bread, and we put this on for breakfast. It's outstanding. If you can make a tartar sauce out of this, there's so many things you could do with this as well. It's absolutely delicious. So that's cashew news. Now we're going to do our salmon. And this is good to do this one because this one's an important one to watch. Okay, so I got my bowl here. I'll take the salmon, Gabby. Thank you. All right. So on our salmon, okay. So I got some salmon here, and I want to show you this. Ice is a fish's best friend. So when we get it from the store, underneath this pan is all ice. Fish is on ice because you want to keep it cold. Okay, very important. Now to take the skin off, we got our salmon. There's a saying in the culinary world that a best way, well, good in will help you get good out, number one. But if you want to increase flavor, simply the best way to do this is increase surface area, right? Okay, so we're going to take our salmon and now we're going to take the skin off just like so. So this has the skin on. A lot of people eat the skin, but the skin, everybody, what they do is they don't like soggy skin, so they like to take this skin and shut that off, please, Gabby, thank you. And so what they like to do is they want it crispy, and you don't want to fry or heat things because when you do that, you get something called, the acronym is AGES because it'll age you, but it's advanced glycation end products from cooking things that are really hot. The other thing I want to show you is on the bottom of this, I'm taking off this belly fat because the belly fat, I don't find it palatable. And nobody, if you go to a restaurant, let me show you what this belly fat looks like. I'm going to try to bring this up close so you can see this. The belly fat is this brown. And I'm taking all this off so you don't see this brown belly fat on here. Okay? Because I don't find it to be palatable. So I like to cut that off, and I do it very gently. Okay, because you don't want to take salmon with it. I just want to take this brown fat off. I guess it was the opposite of what Dr. Mike was talking about. This don't have white fat. I don't want the brown fat. Okay, so that's my salmon. Now, I like to cut this in slices on a bias. So you'll see here, here's my salmon. Hopefully you can see my cutting board. So I'm cutting it not straight down, but my knife is angled almost 17 degrees at an angle. So when I slice through, here's what I got. It's wide. Let me just draw this to you so you can see closer. Okay, it's this wide, but look how thin it is. Now, when I do all that salmon and there's no skin, that means this rub down there, show you the harissa rub, I can get it all around here. So this thing's going to be jumping with flavor, right? Okay, so I'm just going to show you real quick. I'm going to cut a few slices, show them on the cutting board. So instead of that one piece of salmon, you'll see how much slices I'll have here. Okay, so I got this, we're all done, we're good to go. Now, you can see from my cutting board, and if I hold this up, I got all these different slices that makes all that extra surface area. Now I just take a bowl, I put a little bit of olive oil in it, I got fresh garlic in it, I got parsley, my harissa spice, which is a recipe you should have in your ebook, and it should, there's also a video on it, lemon juice, salt, and pepper. The harissa spice is caraway, which goes in a spice grinder. We got smoked paprika, regular paprika, hot pepper seeds. We got cumin in there, garlic. It's absolutely delicious. We take this, we make a rub like so. Now, here's the best way when you use oil. You don't need a lot. The oil acts as a medium to infuse all those flavors. We're making a rub. So by having that salmon on real nice and thin slices, We put all that in here, we toss it around like so. I'm only gonna do one because I got in the interest of time, so we can have Q&A. Then we take all those slices, we're gonna put them on a rack, like so. All right, and then when we're done, we put that in the oven for 17 minutes. Here's what it looks like. Okay, raw salmon, we put them all on a rack. These came out of the oven. So you can see, look how nice these guys are. They're beautiful. 17 minutes, absolutely delicious. And so I got a plate here. I'll put some on this plate, bring it up, and I'm gonna let Gabby hold it up to the camera while I get ready to do our next recipe. So Gabby will show you these close, and I'm gonna start to get ready for the next recipe. Thank you, guys.
There's our nice salmon.
All right. And the last one,
Send some over here, Gabby.
I wish I could mail it to you.
okay. The last one to make that salad dressing for this summer salad. Here's what it looks like. Here's our figs and our prunes that we just put in a pot, reduced down 15 minutes, covered pot, and we're taking that, we just put it in a processor like so, with a half a cup of fresh blueberries, pepper, garlic, a half a cup of balsamic vinegar, and a little bit of Grey Poupon here. I got a little bit of mustard, okay? And then all we're gonna do is take this, blend it, doesn't take long. And this is sweet as heck. Where did the sugars come from? The sugars came from the blueberries, they came from the figs, they came from the prunes. I'm gonna put some of this on a plate, and look, you could see how thick this is. And look how good this is, look. You can see, look how thick that is. It just covers that plate. It's not even dripping down hardly. And it's sweet. Where did the sugar come from? It came from the fig. It came from the prune, and it came from the grapes, the blueberries, the grapes and the balsamic, right? That they made that vinegar from. And the blueberries are loaded with anthocyanins. So that's it for our demonstrations. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to give it over to Robin and give it Dr. Roizen for our Q&A.
Thank you both, Chef and Dr. Roizen. We're going to go ahead and jump to some of our questions that have come in. I know, Dr. Roizen, you went behind a lot of great science, specifically for arthritis. What are maybe the top 10 foods that would be really good to add to our diets for those of us that have arthritis and are trying to control inflammation?
Anything that has an omega-3 or omega-9 in it. So omega-9 is basically extra virgin olive oil. Omega-3 has a lot of choices. Salmon, ocean trout are the two main fishes in America with consistent omega-3s. Almost all the other fish, other than sardines and anchovies, so sardines and anchovies are also omega-3, but other than those, most of them have learned to eat corn and soy meal, and so don't have consistent omega-3s. So the only fish with real fish oils in America are salmon, ocean trout, anchovies, and sardines consistently. Then it is any nut, such as walnuts, flax seeds, canola oil. So it is avocados. It is things you like with omega-3. So if I was going to say those are the top foods that are anti-inflammatory, and key is obviously doing what you're doing, Lisa, which is trying to avoid baked food.
Easier said than done. I know we talked about earlier avoiding inflammation for certain people. How does dairy and wheat and the nightshades play into that?
So each of these is, and Jim may want to do this as well, but each of these is individual. That is, we use elimination diets. When someone comes to us with arthritis, the first thing we do is we teach them to avoid those foods that we've talked about, the simple sugars, the added syrup, simple carbs, foods with carnitine, lecithin, choline, and saturated fat together. And then we also teach them if you will, a deep breathing or a stress management technique. The next thing we do is when they do that, just doing those 2 steps, we're impressed that 60% of their pain goes away within 2 weeks. It's really incredibly remarkable for that effect. And then you add the omega-3s and omega-9s and try and eliminate every other fat if we can do that.
Chef Perko, do you have anything to add with that?
Yeah, so example, like I don't do dairy, right? And one of the reason why I don't is because casein, the protein that's in all dairy, for your viewers, I read a book that Dr. Roizen gave me about the China study. It talks about all the research on casein, so that's why I avoid it. And it's in all dairy. But it goes back to thinking about what you can have and not what you can. So if you're trying to avoid gluten, or if you're being prescribed to not to have or avoid having gluten, for whether it's having celiac disease or you're having intolerance to it, then that's where culinary medicine can help into, when the slide that says, think about all the things that, you can't love what you don't know. Try these things and be surprised. You can bake with Roizen reduction, Lisa. It's absolutely fabulous. You can make a mac and cheeseless that's gluten-free and has no cheese or dairy in it. The cashew nades has no dairy in it. Those chocolate chunk cookies didn't have any dairy in it. You can make mousses without any dairy in it. And what happens once you do if we teach someone how to make something sweet, like I just did this dressing, when we show patients how to make something sweet without adding sugar to one thing, generally they could do it to 6, 7, 8, or 9 other things, and that fosters innovation. Now they're being innovative on their own because they know the technique. So when we create curricula for culinary medicine, we show people how to make things sweet without sugar, moist without fat, savory without sodium. Those are the main 3 addictives. How to create bulk without grains, or density without meat if they wanted to. And those techniques apply to any diet. It doesn't matter the diet because it's a technique.
Dr. Roizen, a lot of people are still a little bit confused about the brown fat. How can we help achieve that? And does fasting help with that?
So the answer is yes. Fasting, exercise, even some drugs help with it. But the fasting is the best way. And the best way of achieving that, the most consistent we have, is a 5-day low-calorie fast, 5 days in a row. So it would be 750 calories for 5 days. Actually, it's 1,000 calories for the first day, 750 for the next 4. It's basically a low protein, low, if you will, fat. Low carbohydrate, low protein, 750 calories a day. So a soup was what was used the first time. And every one of the biomarkers of aging and every inflammatory marker decreases, and you change white fat into brown fat consistently in laboratory studies. So fasting for 5 days, that is, reduced calories for 5 days, does it consistently. To a lesser degree, we have data on 2 and 3 day fasts where they're just water fasts for 2 or 3 days. I couldn't do that, if you will. I can do the 750 calories. I've done it for about 60 weeks, 60 months now. So you can do the 750 calorie 5 days a month fairly easily. I can do that, and many patients can. and the recipe is in the book, but I'll give it to you briefly now. It's if you want to make your own soup, it's 36 ounces of diced tomatoes, 36 ounces of water, 12 ounces of corn niblets, 12 ounces of water. So if you add the water up, it's 48 ounces together, but 36 and 36, 12 and 12, and then onions and spices to taste. You can have 17 8-ounce portions of that without going over 750 calories a day. And that does exactly switching. So we're born with brown fat, which keeps us warm and uses calories. As we get older, we accumulate white or yellow fat off of our omentum. It's a way of going backwards to get more brown fat. But I think the ultimate will be a pluripotent switch that is thrown sometime in the future. That way we'll be able to eliminate, if you will, obesity in humans much more readily.
Okay. Someone's asked, how do we get the anti-inflammatory effects from nuts if you have a nut allergy? Are there any ways
You
that,
don't.
and are peanuts okay?
You don't. Peanuts gave the same effect in the Iowa Women's Health Study. And in several others, that is, peanuts were considered nuts, even though they're a legume. Basically, if you're allergic to nuts, multiple nuts or peanuts, don't have them. You don't. They will cause. It's just like a milk allergy or having gluten or allergy. Don't do it if you've got the allergy to it. There's so many other choices. There are 180 other choices. Robin, I can see, asks, is dairy inflammatory? And the answer is, to some people, yes. And the only way, and what we do is elimination diets in this. So if someone comes in and says and you can find inflammation in their body and you can't find the source, and they say it may be dairy for me, you go on an elimination diet. It's not tough to eliminate dairy. You can eliminate dairy for 3 weeks and see if they get, if their markers of inflammation go down or they feel better.
For Chef Perko, are there any replacements for FODMAP foods? Tomatoes, beans, nightshades, and things.
So yeah, and it depends what it is you're gonna make. So instead of having tomato sauce on pasta, you can make a cauliflower cream sauce by just taking the cauliflower and using either water or broth or alternative milk like almond or hemp milk that is
Or even olive oil.
right. And then you can make a pesto like the one, that's vegan without any cheese. And you could put that in there. Now you got a pesto cream sauce that you could use. Or you could combine, a carrot puree, like a carrot crema, and mix that with a cauliflower cream, and you could put that on. Or an artichoke crema, and you could put that on. So it goes back, think about all the things you can have. That's why that is so huge. When someone's got a diet restriction, this is the best way to do it. You got put the column of the stuff you shouldn't have. There in the case of a FODMAP diet, there's a column in the middle, stuff that maybe you need to eliminate now and you could reintroduce back later. But then you got the column of the can haves. These are the things that work. So initially start building and planning all your meals from the can haves. What kind of sauce can I make with that, right? What kind of side dish can I make with that? And that's where people need to start. Go to the things you can have, list all those foods, and build your meals from there.
Okay, let's address this one of many people are asking about the egg yolks. We thought they were back in good favor and that they were healthy again, and you're saying no. So
the TMAO, trimethylamine oxide, which you can measure, is a inflammatory substance that you produce from trimethylamine that the bacteria inside you change to produce if you have carnitine and saturated fat. Carnitine and pills without saturated fat, no problem. Same thing with lecithin and choline. And in the preponderance of studies, not all, but in the preponderance of studies, it is red meat, processed red meat, and egg yolks that change the TMAO level. 2 recent studies have called that into question. Now, let me tell you how many studies there are. There is literally 1 a day on TMAO in the last year. So 350 studies, a couple of them have called the egg yolk into question. That is, maybe it's fine to have egg yolks again. So I tried to make sure I said it is clearly you can measure TMAO. And the first thing to do is to eliminate is red meat and processed red meat. If you eliminate those and the TMAO level is still above 1 or 1.2, indicating substantial inflammation from your diet, then you would eliminate egg yolks and see if it returns to under 1.2. It usually does. So I have had most of my patients seem to have a egg yolk sensitivity, meaning if they have egg yolks, their bacteria changes. Not everyone, though. And in a couple of studies recently, egg yolks have had much lower effect than red meat or processed red meat. So I would say the way to measure that, and is an egg yolk acceptable for a person, and how many are acceptable, just go to measure the TMAO level.
Okay. And we can do that with our doctors, I'm assuming.
Yeah, TMAO, it's a test that every place I know offers. It's Quest Labs does it.
What about getting omega-3 if you are eating vegan or if you have fish allergies?
So omega-3 you can get from algae. The fish don't make it themselves. They get it from algae. So the point is you can get algal omega-3 as a supplement. It's a little more expensive, not much more, but it comes from algae. The other places you can get omega-3 is the ALA, the lesser or the shorter omega-3s come from plants. So you can get it from canola oil and avocados and walnuts. Those are plant-based sources of omega-3.
What about the role of spices in helping with inflammation and things? I know my doctors talked a lot about turmeric and how that can help.
So that frittata, when we make the frittata, there's some research that shows when turmeric, when under the application of heat, combined with a fat and piperin, which helps make it soluble, you get a good benefit. But here's a good thing about it.
So let me just emphasize one of the things that Jim said is turmeric needs piperin to be absorbed ideally. Piperin is with pepper, so that's why foods are so good. And go ahead, Jim. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure to emphasize that.
No, you're great, Doc. So like if someone buys a curcumin supplement, they get the isolated curcumin, and you always look in the bottle, it's got piperin in there. But when you use the spice, you get all the curcuminoids, not just curcumin, but all of them. So every morning when I take my DHA and my Allegra, my 1 a day and my B12, right? And I take turmeric powder, I put it in some hemp milk because it's got the fat. I sprinkle some black pepper. I swirl that around and I use that to swallow my other, my DHA in that. Because that way I get all the curcuminoids. Plus I take a curcumin supplement. But this way, when you cook with the actual powder, you don't just get the isolated curcumin. You're doing it just like they do in the Middle East, that when they make curries and that, they have all the curcuminoids when they use the powder. Dr. Roizen used to say, what's the healthiest food at McDonald's? And what is that, Doc?
It's the mustard.
Because it's got turmeric in it.
So mustard seed is more expensive than turmeric to make things yellow. So it turns out a package of mustard at McDonald's, one package has 17 milligrams of turmeric in it. So it's the ideal amount for a day.
And then in that frittata, we also put ginger. So ginger fights inflammation. And we could put in fresh herbs like basil, which have health benefits, mix them into the egg whites. That frittata is jumping with flavors. So there's so many things you could do. That's why culinary medicine is so beautiful.
Okay, let's go. What cooking techniques can we use that retain nutrition and don't cause inflammation?
Well, it depends what it is you're going to make. So in the case of a tomato, lycopene increases the more that you cook it. But when you're the main thing is you don't want to heat anything hot, because when you fry, here's what happens. If there's a McDonald's and they got a deep fryer, right? They got to cover it at night because it'll oxidize. Here's the 3 things that kill any oil: heat, light, and air. It kills your cup of coffee. It'll oxidize, causing more free radicals. So anytime you heat something too hot, not only do you promote those free radicals and increase them, you also create these advanced glycation end products, which is especially in red meat or animal products. So the ideal thing is, if you're going to cook, it's better to do it on low temperatures. And if you use moist cooking, like braising or stewing or simmering, that's even healthier because you're not heating things up hot in oil. And if you grill, you don't want to burn or char anything. No, because there's carcinogens associated with anything that is burnt or charred.
Chef, what about an air fryer? We have a question about air fryer.
So that's much better, right? Air fryers are good, but they don't have a big capacity. But, so just be careful what you put in there, but it's a better alternative.
Can I ask a question about making popcorn with olive oil? Is that heating up the oil and killing the effect of the olive oil if you do that? Just in a pan over the stove?
Yeah, it depends at what temperature, but let me give you a way to make popcorn best. So you can put it in a bag or in a Pyrex dish in a microwave, or air pop it. It'll air pop without anything. You then take a little olive oil spray if you want. You can spray it and put on a potassium salt, or if you want a regular salt, you can do that. And just a little bit of the oil and a misted on top, and it'll taste great and have about 95% less fat with it. So much better than popping it in olive oil. If you pop it in the olive oil has to get hot enough and it denatures the olive oil. That's one of the statements. By the way, olives have DMB, which inhibits the production of trimethylamine. Extra virgin olive oil, because the extra virgin, if it's cold pressed, has it in it. But if you heat it, that's a alcohol, so the DMB will go away and you won't get that benefit. So you want it cold pressed and not heated from the half tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil you're going to have every day.
The only thing I'll add to that, I agree with Doc, to air pop it. On our Christmas tree every Christmas, we air pop popcorn and string it with cranberries. It works great. But the best thing, one thing Dr. Roizen did many years ago, he created a GO criteria. And the best way to diminish your desire for added sugar, sodium, and fat, all 3 addictives, is the more you abstain from it, the more you change your taste buds to want to have it. So if you don't have popcorn with oil, after a while, you're not going to want it. If you were in a hospital for 6 months on a low sodium diet and got out, you would detect salt like this. If you didn't have sugar for a long time, everything would become too sweet. And the same is true for fat. That's why people that were on whole milk went down to 2%, wanted skim. And if they were on skim for a long enough time and you gave them a glass of whole, they would think it'd be too thick or rich because they changed their taste buds. So the best way is to air pop it and just forget the oil.
Let's see, is a little bit of sugar, natural sugar, better for inflammation than using sugar substitutes? And what is the story with
So-
stevia and honey?
We don't have great data on it, but probably a little bit of sugar, especially, but try allulose, because allulose seems to be a sugar that doesn't have the sugar effects that I went through, those 4 effects early in the slides.
Okay.
We should, I don't want to go over time, so I apologize, and I don't want, so forgive us if we're going over time, will you? I know someone was very upset when we went over the hour, over the time, so I apologize.
All right, let's go ahead and we'll get one last question. Your best dairy and milk substitutes.
That's yours, Jim.
That's a great question. So I mentioned earlier about cauliflower cream. I showed you that cashewnaise, which we could easily do a cashew whip, that we do a vegan chocolate cupcake that's got a cashew whip icing on it that is outstanding with no sugar other than sweetened with a raisin reduction, right? You could use any alternative milk. There's hemp milk, there's a whole bunch of milks out there. Just want them all unsweetened. They now got great cheeses that you can make from nuts that are made from nuts, right? There's a good one. One I like is the brand is called Kite Hill. They make a great nut cheese that doesn't have a lot of preservatives in it. So always think about all the things you can have, not what you can't. That milkshake that I showed you with the banana and the almond butter and the vanilla, right? And the flaxseed. Flaxseed's got lignans in, they help lower your blood pressure. And so instead of having ice cream or a milkshake, you could have that. If you want to have ice cream, if you just take a banana and put it in the freezer and take it out, it's like eating ice cream. Dip it in chocolate, now you got a chocolate covered banana that's, like a chocolate covered ice cream bar, right? They make those Unanimous machines you can put frozen bananas through and other berries through. But you'd be surprised. Think about all the things you can have, not what you can't. Alternative milks, cream sauces from the cauliflower. You could use tofu in a lot of applications to make something creamy like a mousse. You could add chocolate to tofu and cinnamon and cocoa powder and vanilla, and you got a chocolate tofu mousse that didn't have eggs. I encourage everybody to go to the internet. You can check it. And we just want to get back into the kitchen like this, start cooking, and you'd be surprised what you'll come up with. And every time you do one, you're going to get better and better and better at it.
Thank you, Dr. Roizen, and thank you, Chef Perko. Lots and lots of information tonight, lots of different choices. We appreciate your time and your efforts in teaching us this evening, and just want to say thank you once again.
Thank you for letting us be here, and Robin, we've got to thank Robin an awful lot for putting up with us over the month of preparation. So thank you all.
It's my
Thank you,
pleasure.
everybody.
Thank you. We appreciate your assistant, Abby, as well. All righty. We'll go ahead and let them go. We do just have a few more housekeeping things to go over. For those of you within Arthritis Foundation, we hope you have learned a lot this evening. Hopefully you realize there are lots and lots of resources and many continued areas to explore in this, because it is a very personal thing. What works for one person doesn't always work for another, and hopefully we got to some of your questions. If we didn't get them all answered, please make sure you go to arthritis.org. We have the helpline there. where you can get a lot of questions answered. Also, if you are not a member of a Live Yes Connect group, jump on the connectgroups.arthritis.org. You can find within your state or even some of the national groups that have formed for certain groups of people, like people who are new to arthritis or veterans. Find your tribe or your people. As a Connect group leader, I can tell you it's a great resource to talk with other people who have the same kind of diseases and the same kind of issues that you do, that you can find lots of help and information from. We do want to remind you that there is a monthly webinar and you can sign up, and our next one is coming up March 22nd for Sleep Solutions for Pain. We're so glad that you joined us tonight so we can continue to give good programming. Thank you all and have a good night.